notes are like a real bummer for live storytelling, but my brain is made of Swiss cheese, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. So my family, everyone in my family likes to think that they're like really good in a crisis situation, but other people don't always agree with us. We don't always like react in the most emotionally appropriate way for any given situation. So when I got a phone call at work from my mom that my dad was sick and in the hospital, I was actually kind of relieved that I didn't have to work the next day and not really panicking as I drove my way through the tangle of parkways and interstates between us. My parents had recently relocated from northern New Jersey to the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania for retirement, and the timing of that would be that much more of a kick in the gut once I had found out what had happened. When I got to the hospital, my cousin took me to a what I thought was a surprisingly cozy waiting room. And only my mother was there, looking very eerily calm, like in a creepy way, not at all in a reassuring way. Always on brand and entirely inappropriate for this situation, my mother turned to me and in a very deadpan way said, "Your dad's dead, you know." The next day, we talked to the funeral director for what seemed like an eternity. But at the same time, it was kind of like peppered with laughs about this $600 carved wooden duck urn that had some sort of relevance to this weird inside joke in my family from the 70s. The funeral director was less amused by this than we were, as we discussed in detail what would happen to my father's body. He was an organ donor, so that would happen. Then he would be embalmed for a wake, and then he would be cremated, and then we talked about what would happen to his ashes. The next evening, and what felt like another eternity later, we had just finished a wildly unsatisfactory dinner at a strip mall pizzeria, and were walking to the car. It was an unseasonably warm night for November, and it had just rained, so there was that amazing smell of the rain on the pavement, and the light from the storefront signs reflected off the wet pavement in this really surreal way. And that was when my mother's phone rang. I could hear the funeral director on the other end sounding like an adult in a Peanuts cartoon. So I couldn't really understand what he was saying, but then I heard my mother say in this bone-chilling way, "What?" A few more minutes passed as he said something, and she hung up the phone, and she said, "Everything's fine, but they lost your dad's body." It turned out that there had been some sort of mix-up between the hospital and the organ donation people and the funeral home, and his status as an organ donor had been mistaken as somebody who was making a whole body donation. And it turned out that his body was halfway to Philadelphia before anyone realized. For once, my mother and my brother reacted in what seemed like a probably pretty appropriate way. My mother was crying in a way that I hadn't seen her do yet since she lost her husband. And my brother was furiously pacing around the parking lot screaming about murdering somebody. But me, I was laughing hysterically. And once I finally caught my breath, I was able to croak out, "I promise you this is going to be so funny someday." They didn't really agree with me. But my dad did make it back in time for the wake. And it was one of those situations where they did like kind of too good of a job embalming the body, so he didn't actually look dead. He had this weird smirk on his face, and it kind of seemed like he was just really playing this elaborate practical joke on us all. But it wasn't a practical joke. But the joke's on him, because now he lives in that wooden duck urn, and I still haven't stopped laughing about the time that they lost my dad's body.
First.